Good morning, everyone. It's my honor to welcome you to St.Marys to the Main Street session. This is a session on Main Streets. If you're looking for the session on bridges, it's on the main floor. We have three panelists with us here today. Before we begin, I was told I should ask if anyone has one of these fine electronic devices, if you would please turn it off or turn it to silence. As well, if you need the washrooms during the presentation, they are on the second floor below. There is an elevator at the rear if you need to use an elevator. My name is Stratford-St, and I'm proud to be the mayor of St. Marys and to welcome you here on behalf of council and the staff who worked hard to put this conference together. I apologize for the weather. Didn't do anything about that. But I don't apologize for the construction that you've been trying to navigate. We feel very important about our history and trying to maintain our downtown and our historical nature of our St. Marys. So I have some people here today that can talk about the project that we're doing and what we've done to try and maintain the historical character of our downtown while we're struggling to maintain accessibility and some of the new modern things that we have to deal with in terms of legislation. With us at my far left, I have Tricia McKinnon, who was previously our curator of our museum, is now our deputy clerk. And Tricia has an extensive background in history and looked after our museum and knows a lot about the culture and heritage of St. Marys. Trish brings many years of experience to the table. I also have Julie Dr. Johnson, who is a merchant in downtown St. Marys. She's the chair of our BIA, owns a historical building in our downtown historic district. Actually, we currently have about 150 properties in our HCD district. So Julie's been very active in trying to promote some of the programs that our council does to try and preserve our heritage and some of the things we can do to help keep downtown St. Marys beautiful. And to my direct left, I have Bruce Grant, who started his career in public works in Stratford, was the chair of the Public Works Board here in St. Marys. As well, he went on to become our CEO and is now employed with BM Ross and is working as a consultant on the downtown project. So Bruce not only has a very deep knowledge of our downtown and the infrastructure, he has a passion for the town like few I've met. So it's my honor to have all these three people with us this morning actually to give you an update on our project and talk a bit about how things are here in St. Marys. The way it will happen is we will have a session for about an hour and 15 minutes, and at the end of the session, we'll have a chance for questions, if you would, and then my understanding is everyone's invited for lunch up at the United Church. Hopefully it's warm by then, just up the hill. And again, welcome, and I'll turn the floor over to our panelists.
Well, welcome. I will say that you probably see on your program that you're expecting Brent Kittmer, our CAO, and unfortunately he has come down with the flu. So I am filling in for him, but I have been extensively involved with the construction project from the beginning. So thank you very much for joining us today. I think you'll see as we make our way through the panel and through our discussion today, you can see how excited and enthusiastic and I think how proud we are of what we've accomplished to date with the construction project. And just to begin, just to walk you through how we're going to do this, it's going to be very much a conversation. We'll each be talking to specific topics, but we might be jumping in and making points along the way too, because we all have a different perspective, but a unified vision for the project. So we'll begin with sort of highlighting what the scope of work is, what is actually entailed in this project. We'll be talking about some of the constraints that we are aware of and some of the surprises that have come up regarding constraints. We'll talk about our pre-planned process and our design process and walk you through how we decided to organize that process and talking about engineering design and public relations efforts for our construction project. We'll talk about what's actually happening right now, where we are, and where we're going with the project. And then we'll also talk about the lessons learned, because I think that's probably why we're here, is to learn about our successes, some of the struggles that we have found as we've worked our way through the project. So as I said, you'll see our enthusiasm. We're proud of this project, and we're very pleased to be sharing it with you. I'm going to turn the project over now to Bruce Grant.
Well, thank you and welcome everybody to St. Marys. Preservation in a changing world. That's the theme of this conference. That's very topical, and I guess that's how a reconstruction of the Main Street fits into this seminar today. So Well, I'm going to share with you a bit of the history that I'm familiar with. In about 1968, Queen Street, St. Marys, stopped being Highway 7. St. Marys was bypassed. So until that point, that was Highway 7, if you can picture a highway going through the downtown. And that was quite common in the small towns in rural Ontario. In 1972, there was a major reconstruction of Queen Street. Storm sewers, sanitary sewers, water mains, all the services. By the way, I guess we should get to this. Water mains, services, water services, sanitary services, storm services, roads and sidewalk were all completely reconstructed in 1972. So my take on it is that the built infrastructure, the buried infrastructure is youthful to middle age. We would expect 100 years of service life from that kind of infrastructure, from water mains, from sanitary and storm sewers. The signalized intersections were installed at Water and Wellington in the 1960s. The Church Street intersection right out here was signalized in the 1980s. And illumination was constructed, freshened up in 1972, and has since been replaced with decorative concrete poles and luminaires. They are not LED. And that was in the mid-1990s. So the scope of the project was initiated for two reasons, but primarily that the water services were failing. The copper water services, for some reason, are not long-lasting in St. Marys, and certainly weren't on Queen Street. There had been a number of repairs done. The road surface was getting into poor condition. The sidewalk had become a patchwork quilt of repairs. But the main driver for the project was to replace those copper water services. In 2006, the town changed its policy on water service material and selected PEX, a polyethylene cross-braided product that ought to have 100 years service life and should match the service life of the mains. So the real driver of the underground, anyway, was those copper water services. Of course, in addition with that, the road surface was becoming deteriorated with that series of excavations that had occurred. So that was the driver. So the fix became largely a reconstruction and rehabilitation project. And I can tell you that while people talked about refurbishment of the core area or revitalization of the core area, the truth is that we really needed to upgrade that failing infrastructure, particularly the copper water services on the road surface. So the other thing that is interesting to note, and many of you will be familiar with heritage aspects, is that the buildings have approximately 20 feet of frontage, 6 meters of frontage. So every 6 meters on each side of the road is a water service. By the time you do an excavation and replacement of that, there's virtually nothing left. The other thing that's important to note in a core area, when sidewalk is constructed right up to the building face, we don't want to leave a piece of water service under that fresh sidewalk. So in fact, the project required going right through the building walls into the inside of the basements of the buildings with new water services. So that expanded the scope of the work of rebed, and it increases the complexity of it as well. So in addition to the water service replacement, asphalt rehabilitation, sidewalk reconstruction occurred, and the project grew in scope to include the Victoria Bridge rehabilitation. Now it was replaced in 1983, I believe I have that year right, and is in very good condition. It's a reinforced concrete structure with an asphalt waterproof membrane protecting the concrete under the road, and then a couple of layers of asphalt to protect the membrane, and that's the running surface. The membrane was 33 years old, and reaching the end of its realistic service life. So as part of the project, the membrane will be removed and replaced, and the asphalt will be reinstated. While that's happening, the sidewalks were constructed slightly on the narrow side in 1983, and the road surface is slightly wider than it really needs to be. So the sidewalks are going to be widened after the membrane is taken off by about a foot on each side, and that will improve winter snow clearing operations as well as making it more pedestrian friendly. There's a heritage easement on that bridge, and in conversation with those folks, it was determined that the work that's being done on the bridge has no impact or no effect on that heritage easement. So the project limits are from Peel Street, which is just outside of Tim Hortons, to Thomas Street, which is west of the Victoria Bridge. So, with today's needs, a project of this scope brings in a few other requirements as well. It needed to be fully accessible for pedestrians at the intersections. So we've gone with push buttons, or will be going with push buttons, pedestrian heads. They will have audible. We've also got tactile plates in place at the intersections. We've attempted to make as many storefronts as possible accessible rather, and you should appreciate that the topography of St. Mary's adds to the scenic beauty, but it also adds to the challenges of this kind of project or constructing any roads and sidewalks. So included with the project was event power. Queen Street closes down for the Baseball Hall of Fame induction each year, for the Heritage Festival each year, and it's important to have event power available for the things that go on there. In the past, the merchants have graciously been allowing connection into their own power systems to provide power for whatever was happening. So it will be part of this project. And there were also services installed at the intersection here and near the Victoria Bridge for future beautification aspects. And those were areas where we had a wee bit more space to work with. Another challenge that this project faced is the physical space. You'll recall that I mentioned this was Highway 7 until about 1968. It is, in fact, the only connection through the town from beyond the west limits to beyond the east limits. There are two bridges crossing the Thames River, and one of them is the Victoria Bridge here on Queen Street. So it's important that we maintain good traffic flows, and from a past traffic manager, that was one of the critical elements for myself. But the stores were created long before we had the kind of vehicles we have today and busyness that people face today. So the other thing that is important to note is that the buildings are not in a straight alignment. Some are behind property line, and some are slightly encroaching onto the road allowance, but they do vary in position. And you'll notice that if any of you take the walking tour this afternoon. So that sets up a couple of other challenges. So the physical space is narrower than what we would typically have for an arterial road. It's 66 feet in the old way, just slightly over 20 meters. And it leaves very little space to do anything creative. So for example, and I'll try not to bore you with this, but these are the facts. The annual average daily traffic on Queen Street today is about 10,000 vehicles. So it's not insignificant. It was felt important, and the merchants confirmed that during their consultation sessions, that we needed to retain parking on both sides of the street in order to make their businesses flourish or thrive as well as possible. In order to keep that much traffic flowing through town consistently, we need a lane of traffic either direction, and at the intersections, opposing left turn lanes. When you add all that up and squeeze it in as tight as you can, that amounts to just about 49 feet of the 66 feet that we had to work with. It leaves 17, 8.5 feet each side for sidewalks, and that's pretty narrow. Adding in street furniture compounds the problem. So you can appreciate that the space we had to work with was a constraint. The other thing that makes it interesting, and I alluded to this earlier, is the topography. Queen Street has a longitudinal grade through in front of us here at about 6%. Sidewalks are not to exceed 5% according to the Accessibility Act. So it's difficult to make those two work. And in fact, there is an allowance in there if the grade of the street exceeds the 5%, that you can also do that with sidewalks. But it makes it more difficult, and we wanted to be careful of the texture of that sidewalk as well. When we look at storefronts such as these, a 6% grade means about 2¼ inches difference from one side to the other on a 3-foot wide door. The one on the picture to the left is about 4 feet wide. The one in the middle is more than 6 feet wide. So you can appreciate there's quite a difference from one side to the other of a flat step. That sets up some trip hazards that need to be considered. Oh, the other thing then that has taken effect beginning of this year for municipalities, from now on going forward, we have to comply with the Accessibility for Ontario with Disabilities Act. And the public space has to be designated in compliance, designed in compliance with the AODA. And we simply have to embrace it because it's not going to help to fight against it. So.
And Bruce, if I just may jump in as well, what we have been finding, I'm the staff liaison for the Heritage Committee here in St. Mary's, and we have been finding that store owners themselves wanted to make their buildings more accessible. So we have been seeing applications, heritage permits, for the removal of the limestone sills from their doors, from their entrances, so that it would drop and make their buildings more accessible. So in fact, sometimes that heritage element would be affected, but this Queen Street project actually enabled those limestone sills to stay in place because it was the sidewalk that was changing, not the sill. So from our perspective, the Queen Street project, from a heritage perspective, actually enabled those heritage elements to stay in place. And I just thought I would make note of that here as well.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, so the stakeholder expectations, many of them are seeing this as an opportunity to revitalize the downtown core. And I prefer to say refurbish because I think it's revitalized by the people that work and live here. And we can build it as well as we can, given the constraints we've got. But it involves the people aspect as well. Anyway, the effect is an understanding that this could not be a typical construction approach. A collaborative process will be required.
So the town understood the scope of the project and the infrastructure needs that needed to take place. And I think what was key here for the town and the community was the pre-planning process. And the very first step was understanding what the expectations and the needs were within the community. So accessibility was one of those items. So as I had mentioned, we knew that the store owners themselves were looking at trying to make their stores more accessible. We also had to understand what the expectations were of the BIA and the store owners and what they were looking for and what the expectations were in the project. So a number of key steps were taken as part of this. The first one was making sure that we had a firm, the engineers that we were working with, understood the needs of the community, understood what the town was looking for, and was very collaborative and open to discussions. And B.M. Ross and Associates the town has worked with them in the past on a number of programs and projects. They're very well respected, and it was that collaborative approach that we were looking for. I think also one of the biggest assets we had was actually sitting right next to me was Bruce Grant, who was a former CAO here, knew the community, everyone knew Bruce. So when Bruce speaks in the community, a lot of people listen. So there was that wonderful opportunity to have that respect from the community and also to have that pre-existing relationship that sort of made the process that much easier. And as I talked about, sorry, I'm just going to set this down. For us here in the town, the pre-planning was the most important aspect, the most important thing we could do to ensure the success of this project. And it was sort of reaching out and seeing what those wants and needs were in the community. And the very first meeting that we had a very good turnout from the public as to understanding what they were looking for, what the scope of the project was. And the engineers actually delivered the scope of the project. They led the presentation and sort of set the parameters. I think this was where the issue came in, that expectations from the community of what this project was going to be differed to what the actual scope of the project was. So again, it was an infrastructure project, not a rehabilitation and a completely redoing of the main street. The core purpose of this was the pipes in the ground. And in those early consultations with B.M. Ross, it was talking about what are all of the issues that are going to take place as part of this project. So we needed to look at the inventory of the building stock in the community. So as Bruce had mentioned, or Al, I believe, had mentioned, there's about 158 properties that fall within the Heritage Conservation District, and a large majority of them are on the Queen Street, or right on Queen Street, fronting Queen Street, and would have a direct impact, would be directly impacted by this infrastructure project. So we needed to take photographs. So B.M. Ross, the engineers, took photographs of all of those entrances. So we have this wonderful photograph inventory of, as you saw previously, of the doorsteps, of those areas which are of concern, what facades of the building may be impacted. So this wonderful inventory of the buildings were taken first. The other thing that was completed was the inspections of the interior buildings, and this I'll turn over to Bruce to speak about as well, as to what exactly those inspections entail, because as he mentioned, the water lines were coming right into and through in the buildings, and that meant a relationship with all of the property owners who needed to be established as well.
Bruce, can I ask a question here?
Sure, go ahead.
One thing that, when you're talking about this, one thing that didn't become clear is, did you create a design to take to the public meetings, or did you have the public meetings to help you create the design?
So the initial public meeting was, if you will, an information gathering session from the public. We were looking to hear what they might want to see happen at during the construction project. But some of what I said to you earlier about the physical constraints was laid out for the people at the beginning of that session. So there needed to be an understanding that, for example, if we take parking away from one side and build some kind of creative landscape features that might be attractive, but it would detract from people trying to run a business in the downtown. So there was a bit of information given, but it was a pre-designed meeting, if you will. So we didn't have any design done at that stage. I had some ideas in my head because of those limitations. But no, that was pre-design, and I'm actually most comfortable with doing a pre-design meeting with the public before we get into the final actual design work. I think it's a good first step.
Can I say something? Something that was important about that first meeting is the wording. The word design made people downtown feel that it was, the sky was the limit and Disney was on its way, as opposed to the fact that it was a construction project, it was infrastructure, it wasn't as much aesthetics. So after that, some people went away with this vision of grandeur and started creating their own designs and submitting them. In one sense, that wasn't really good, because then we had to come back and say, well, we're not exactly doing that. This is what is going to happen, and we're going to make things look really nice in the meantime. But it took a lot of time after the fact to kind of calm people down from that and make them understand that wasn't happening, because we don't have that physical space to do bump outs and to do all of these great things. So I would just always caution people on their wording. If it is a redesign, then a redesign it is. If it's reconstruction, it's reconstruction. But it just needs to be very clear to the population at large.
I think that's an excellent point that Julie makes, and I may have underplayed that a wee bit. Managing expectations, as you well know, is important, and it's especially important if we get into starting to tear down heritage features that we really want to retain. So we have to manage those expectations, and I think I could have done a stronger job of that at that initial meeting. On the other hand, the public need to have an opportunity to speak. They need to have a say in these projects, and sometimes we get some really valuable insight from the people on the street. We're actually going to talk about the sidewalk a little bit more first, and I'm going to move from this slide to the next one, and I'm going to work these two in conjunction. So, something that BM Ross has done on a number of downtown projects that they've been involved in is to set up the sidewalks in, if you will, sort of three sections. Something called a building strip, something called a path of travel, and something called a boulevard. And I may dwell on this too long for you, but I think it's a really important piece. I mentioned earlier that the building fronts vary as you go down the street. They're not collinear. So the building strip takes up those differences and establishes a straight line for the side of the sidewalk that's nearest those buildings. And the path of travel under the AODA requirements is that the path of travel must be 1.5 meters minimum, 1.8 meters preferred in width. So we're able to establish that continuous line in the path of travel. The other thing, the path of travel has a preferred maximum crossfall of 4%, and preferred crossfall of up to 4%. It can go to a maximum of 5% crossfall in the AODA. And then I mentioned earlier the running slope along the street, not more than 5%, although you can go to at least the same grade as the street if it exceeds that. So the other thing that happens, and you notice the pictures with the various steps that were different widths one side to the other, in order to get from Peel down to Water with all of those grade changes, and the road has to be a continuous path, but the doorsteps are all over the place. The building strip and the boulevard give us extra room to negotiate those added grades, and yet retain the path of travel at a constant, reasonable crossfall and longitudinal grade. So that's a really important feature of those three particular elements. I think that's all I need to say on that.
Sorry, question.
Yes.
How do accessibility, how do you get from the path of travel to the building strip to access the space? Are they different elevations?
Yeah, so there are cases where that building strip exceeds the path of travel crossfall. The building strip is allowed to go as high as 8% crossfall. So that gives us a little bit more room to work. These, by the way, so the edge of the building strip matches the edge of the path of travel, which matches the edge of the boulevard, if that's what your question was. And then we take up some variations in both the boulevard area and the building strip area adjacent to the steps. If you do the walking tour this afternoon, you'll see in the furthest block west, on the north side, we've got Water to Wilmington essentially completed now. While the fence kind of clouds it a wee bit for you, the security fence, you probably can identify. The path of the building strip is quite wide in that section. That's an area where actually the buildings are even back beyond property line a couple of feet. So we had more room to work with, but you can't do much with it other than make it into a walking space. Okay, so we're going to remember those wide entrances with the large steps. Raising the sidewalk to make them accessible is going to require, or could require, facade modifications, and that was one of the things that we took a fair bit of time looking at during the design stage. We also involved Trish and the Heritage Committee, making sure that we were working within their wishes and getting at least their concurrence and often their approval on what was being recommended. And then the question, who applies for the permits and who pays for the work if there's a facade modification, and I think, Trish, you're going to speak to that.
I think I'll just stay right here. I think the important thing to note too is in regards to accessibility, the engineers met with the chair of the accessibility committee here in St. Mary's, and they did a personal walk downtown with the chair of the accessibility committee. So again, this was key to have that collaborative effect, those questions and answers taking place sort of one-on-one with the engineers and the chair of the accessibility committee. So the chair could come back and speak to the accessibility committee, discuss it, and then again could come back and speak with the engineers. And the same thing happened regards to heritage, as Bruce had mentioned. We went out and we looked at specifically the buildings that we thought might be a concern. What impact might there be on the facade of the building? And I think it's interesting to note the list that we had to begin with, the concern list was much greater. We sort of, I think, erred on the side of caution. And then reality, I think we're down to 3 buildings that have any facade changes required. So to start with, on our initial walk, we had sort of this wonderful dialogue taking place, and I know the same happened with the chair of the accessibility committee. So I think that's a key point to note as well, that those individual conversations, that communication with your committees of council really helped to make that accessibility and heritage concerns lessen. The question too about who's going to pay for the work that needs to be done to the facades of these buildings, and how are we going to go about with the heritage permits that are required. And that's where town staff were very cognizant that we need to make this as easy as possible for the property owners. We didn't want to place extra burden and time and concern, because there was already enough concern about this project and the possible loss of business. So what the plan was and what we were going to do is, because we knew the scope of work, the town actually would complete the heritage permit applications, because the property owner, they may not know specifically all of the changes that might be taking place throughout the street. So we wanted to assist with that. And again, that huge list that we had went down to 3. And also to pay for those changes. So let's say the grade is coming up on the sidewalk and it's going to impact perhaps on some wood trim on the building. There was concern too that if that was left to the property owner, would it be replaced? I think the concern was we didn't want to have finished the project, have a beautiful new road surface and sidewalk surface, and then actually leave the buildings in worse condition than when we started the project. So to make that, that work to go smoother, and because it was going to be, the impact was due to the reconstruction project, the town was going to pay for those alterations that were required on the facade of the building. So that was built into the budget for the project, and that the work was going to be done subcontracted by the contractor themselves, and so that the contractors had control over that we knew the scope of work. And even you know, the day before the work was going to be done, the engineers and construction staff, we met and went out and looked at the building. So again, there was that constant conversation, so pre-planning and the conversation even the day before the work started. We went out and we took a look and we pointed and we talked about it. So that, I think, is a really key process, and I think that was comforting as well for the property owners, that the town was taking the initiative to ensure that the work was going to be completed and was going to be responsible for those costs.
Back to the facade improvement. That was, we were part of, from the very beginning, we were part of the meeting the BIA was. And there would be the whole construction group and staff, and everybody was at the same table. And when that first conversation came up about facades, we just thought, there's no way that we can ask building owners to go through the process, and we definitely can't ask them to pay for it. But it was never a problem, because it just got rectified really quickly. That was a huge thing to the downtown businesses, because then they really got that it was understood that this was a challenge for us, and we weren't being penalized by anything, and we were going to look good at the end, and they were taking care of all of it. That was a very big part of the initial steps. The next piece here was on the BIA. So part of the challenge that everybody felt, obviously, is how our businesses were going to be impacted. We have a very good tourist season here. Last year was probably one of the best tourist seasons we've had in 10 years, and so we thought we built all this momentum now, and then suddenly the construction is going to take it away. So that was a big part for us, was how were we going to deal with it. The initial plan of the construction was for it to be done the second week in June, which is induction weekend. We have a huge street festival that's put on by the Toronto Blue Jays on June 18th, and so that was the initial goal, was to have it done by then. Well, it's not, which is fine, because we knew that in advance. We were able to make an alternate plan. It will now be on Water Street. The Blue Jays are fine with it. It doesn't impact anything. We will all still benefit. But I think coming up with that quickly, knowing that, you know what, that initial plan is not going to work. We rebooked, not at the last minute, and we made a new plan. So part of all of what we've done with the BIA as far as business for the summer, it's going to be over by mid-July, which we're not keeping anything from it, but we're not publicizing it because we have lots of other plans. So they still come. It's just a different look that they're coming to, and they're loving it. Getting the BIA and the merchants and everybody on board to just maybe go with what we have as opposed to what we don't have, that was key to the whole program. And the fact that it's over the second week in July is key, because we then still have a huge tourist season.
And I think this probably is the most important point here, and what has allowed us to be so successful in this project, is the first step was developing a project steering group. And that first meeting, there were probably 21 people in the room. And that steering group included the engineers, the contractors, representatives from the BIA, Heritage, Accessibility Committee, and town staff. And town staff, it wasn't just one representative, it was a representative from the communication department, a representative, or several representatives from Public Works. So we had this wonderful broad range of stakeholders at the table that were part of this collaborative discussion and all received the same information at the same time and could push out that information to where it needed to go. So for example, from the town staff perspective, you would have the Director of Public Works attending, but you'd also have frontline staff from Public Works attending, so that you have this bottom-up and top-down effect of communication. So everyone was in the know, and I think that was really key to the success of the program, is these wonderful meetings that we had months in advance of the project even starting. So I'm trying to think, what was the date of the first meeting? Was it February?
No.
November. Yeah. So we started in November with our first meeting and getting everyone in the room. And I can't emphasize that enough, that was really key to the project. And the frequent nature of those meetings. So we met on a regular basis with all of the stakeholders in the room, and a lot of work got done in those meetings.
Excuse me. Which year of November?
2015.
Okay, thank you, because I got the feeling it was last year. That was last year. Sorry, 2 years. That's fast. Extremely fast.
Just talk a wee bit about the pre-design, and I'll expand on what Trish said. So at the stakeholders group actually included as well Festival Hydro, who is the hydro provider here in town, Bell, Unigas, Rogers, Quadro Communications, which is a local communications company, and then some other interested citizens. So we wanted, first of all, to introduce all of the stakeholders that we could think of at the start of the process. And that helped us with the pre-design. We were able to discover that Festival Hydro, in fact, has no interest in Queen Street. They service all the buildings from the rear. So it was good to be able to set aside certain problems and to focus on others. For example, Bell wants to augment their infrastructure in the downtown. Quadro ended up finding another route and has no interest, nor does Rogers. But those are things that we needed to find out, and we felt that they were all stakeholders in that early stage. The pre-construction survey, and that's not a field survey, that was a circular asking people certain questions, and I think you were Julie.
A survey was put together by town staff to go out to all of the property owners on both sides of Queen Street with specific questions that we needed to know for the project. For example, what are your hours of operation? Entrances. Do you have a rear entrance that the public can use? Are there particular days of the week that your business is closed? Do you require water for every day that your business is open? How many employees do you employ? We asked questions. So we had this wonderful list of questions, and from those responses, that helped us with the construction project. For example, if there's a day of the week that the business is closed and they require water to do their business, for example, the restaurants on the main street, they were closed on a particular day, that we had that information and that could be passed along. We shared that data with the engineers so that the contractors would have that information as well. And then we could build on that information for our communication strategy as well.
I just have a quick question. I'm assuming from what you're saying that there's no residential on the second or third floor of any of those buildings?
There is.
And what do they do for water?
When the water was out, the first time it was out, it was about 4 hours. And then the second time it was out, which was just this week, it was 15 or 20 minutes. And we had pre-warning, like a few days ahead, so those people that had tenants were able to tell them. I don't think it was a problem for anybody, any residential over the storm. Something with those surveys as well that I think is really important, again, because I have the merchant VIA hat, What it did again for those people was help to understand that the town really did care about our businesses, that we weren't the only ones that were worried about how we were going to stay in business. The fact that they wanted to know about our deliveries, that they knew we needed them. How many employees we had, that was key for parking. Because if we did have parking behind our stores, and it was employee parking, because it could be, we needed them to move. And they needed to go somewhere, because we now needed that parking for customers. So that helped the town determine exactly how much extra space was required to accommodate all of those people. Again, it was key. But again, it just opened that door that now the town knows more about all of the goings on, really, than they ever did before, because it helps it all work together.
How many of your properties are, like you've got property owners, how many are also the store owners? You get what I'm saying? Like, often buildings are owned by people remote from the community, even, or in the community, but the stores are tenants, the people above are tenants.
I don't remember.
Just to answer that, I don't have that information with me. It was part of the survey because we needed to know who to contact. So I don't have the answer to that. But typically, the residents in the second or third stories are not owners. In a couple of cases, they are, I think. And often, the store owners are tenants as well. It ended up the people that we communicated with the most were the people that had the greatest direct stake in the impacts of the project. So we didn't dwell so much on who the owner was and who the tenant was, although we did collect that information and initially made everyone aware of the project. We needed permission to do the basement investigations. And that initial request was to both parties actually, and we were looking for a response from whoever was responsible for access to the basement.
Just a quick one. Did you need an EA? Did you have to do an EA for this project?
This project does not require an EA. You would typically require an EA if it were a change of use, if I can. In other words, let's say we were taking a 2-lane street to a 4-lane, or we were eliminating the sidewalks, so we were doing something that's different than the way it's been behaving. But it's been a public road, 2 lanes, one each direction, with parking 2 sides and sidewalks. So an EA was not required for this project. We may appear a little bit disjointed here. Brent's not feeling well today, and Brent actually put this PowerPoint together. He deserves a lot of credit because he's put some great stuff here. Okay, so one of the things that I think Julie was going to help with this one, but one of the things that even from our perspective, and now I'll talk about my former years of working with the municipality, is I have an appreciation for how vital it is that we maintain business continuity. I mean, it's really critical for the people that make their livelihood from the core areas. So the work, the project had to be done in such a way that they were able to keep their doors open and continue to work. Again, once the design was substantially complete and reviewed by the steering committee, then some key questions were brought forward to council because there were certain things that the decision makers had to establish. And I'll just use, for example, there used to be trees in the downtown. We've had struggles trying to keep them alive. So there was a decision to be made, trees or no trees. Council decided we would go without trees. And that was based on recommendations from the steering committee, but there were certain resolutions of council. And His Worship had to withstand a marathon session. We passed, I think, about 12 or so resolutions at that meeting on various aspects. What would the boulevard look like? And so council passed a resolution that it would be stamped concrete It would have an ashlar pattern, it would be colored gray, and it would resemble some of the limestone that we have in town here, as well as it would be sympathetic to the local cement industry. So we wanted to use concrete wherever possible. Council passed a resolution so that it wouldn't be debated beyond that point. The traffic signal standards, and I can tell you that this is not insignificant. The project costs increased by about $160,000 in order to satisfy the new requirements of the AODA. And that's something that, as I said earlier, we have to embrace, but it is a consideration for projects of this nature. So it was agreed that we would be installing pedestrian heads, and that comes with the need for the push buttons, and you have to have the audibles for those push buttons. There needed to be tactile strips on the sidewalk, but all of those things were resolved by council so that there would not be further debate going forward. Council has the final say in decisions of that nature. So I think I'm going to carry on. Okay, so Julie's also going to help as well. But so a second public open house was held in February, and that was after the design had been virtually finalized and we were ready to go to tender. Council had made some decisions, but it was just helpful to answer any questions or concerns that people that hadn't been previously in the loop would be able to become aware of. In addition to that, part of the efforts included, and I think Trish maybe wasn't aware of this, but council increased their heritage facade, it's a facade improvement budget specifically for this year in order to undertake some of those improvements that were going to be needed that would have been affected by the work. So that was a good bit of foresight. That meant that there was money there to work with to do that work, and I believe the BIA had you allocated some funds from your reserves.
We had, just in the planning process, so the BIA's prior, like for years and years and years, the chairperson of the BIA hated the light standards with a passion. And every single year put money away to buy new light standards one day. Anyways, out of respect for him, we had this money that had been put away, and so when we were at the construction meetings, we were very upfront and said, look, we have this amount of money, this is what we would really like it to be used for, because that's what Charlie wanted, for the light standards. So if we could, that's what we would like. They were very, very open to that. Having said that, the amount of money we had was a drop in the bucket to replace all of them. Like we could have 2 or 4 nice ones, and then the rest would not be so nice. So, but they came up with an alternative for us so that we could refurbish the light standards, put a new coating on them so that they would look new and they would just blend a lot better. Mostly it's the globes that everybody hates. So that's actually being still investigated right now to change them. But that's the BIA's part of the actual capital. That money we want invested in those things, and the town staff were great about seeing how we can make our small amount of money go as far as it could to fix those pieces of the project.
I think I might add that anything that's changed on the globes is not part of this project, but can be done at some later point in time. So moving along to the next part of construction, it was important that we select a good contractor, and the town required that we do a pre-qualification procedure. So in other words, we wanted to make sure that the general contractor, the concrete contractor, and the paving contractor met a pre-qualification standard. Those are the things that we're going to see when the project is finished. We want to make sure that the concrete and the asphalt look as good as they possibly can, and we wanted experienced qualified contractors. So we worked through a pre-qualification process, and I think that was very helpful as well. then to actually use the information we've collected. The steering group focused on some of the key things, but on the day-to-day instructions, the actual accountability was left to the contractors with and except 1 or 2 points. They were required to maintain 2 lanes of traffic at all times. As I said earlier, this is the only connection through east and west. There were some people that didn't think that would work. I think it's actually working fairly well. And it keeps the busyness of the downtown. It deals with those 10,000 odd vehicles a day. And by doing that, then they would do one side of the road first and then move to the other side. So they were to do the north side first, which allows for pedestrian traffic on a good, safe sidewalk on the other side of the street at all times. One interesting thing is the water main is on the north side of the street. The services are closer to the buildings than from the water main, and actually the main is now underneath the road that's being paved. How do we connect the new services on the south side? So the contractor made all of those new connections in the main and left the coil of water service underneath the gravel, and it will be exposed starting at the same time than we do on the other side. So that was an interesting piece of constructability.
So one of the concerns was because the Queen Street was going to be always having 2 lanes of traffic, that meant there would be no parking on Queen Street. So we would lose out, I think it was 52 parking spaces, approximately 52 parking spaces in our downtown core. So we came up with a parking plan. We wanted to ensure that people were still coming downtown, that there were still places to park, and that business would go on in general. So we had, from our survey, we knew how many employees were in the downtown. So we looked at that is our volunteer fire department. It goes off every Saturday at noon, just as a test, so everyone's okay, don't panic. So we came up with a parking plan. We looked at what municipal lots we had, who currently parked in those lots, and where we could move employees who worked in the core and where we could place them within close proximity, but not impeding on patron parking. So we actually worked with different private property owners in town and had an agreement so that we could move employees to a lot down on Water Street. So we also looked at what other municipal lots we had. So for example, the farmers market uses one of the municipal lots beginning the end of May through the summer months. And with conversations, they have relocated to another parking lot, so that municipal lot will stay open for parking during the summer months. So the signage was also key for parking. So we had printed these temporary signs that talked about business parking. So again, to encourage businesses and employees in the downtown core to park in these lots. We also put large signs up for customer and client parking. And what was key was we also put in more directional parking signs to get people to those lots. And then we did parking maps and newsletters. And on the back of the map are areas which show the drop-off zones, so where deliveries can be made, where people can drop off someone if they just need to pop to the bank, where the municipal lots are, where that farmer's market is going to be moved to, and any other information regarding the construction project. And then we also wanted to encourage people to actually park in those lots. So we came up with a parking incentive program that from the survey, we knew how many employees were at each business, so we created parking passes. So we knew, for example, if one of the banks had 15 employees, we made up 15 parking passes for that business, and we then did rewards programs. So they would be put in the dashboard in the parking lots, and we have staff that would go around and record them. And every week there would be a draw, and there would be downtown construction bucks. Like it would be a gift certificate that you would receive for parking in that parking lot. So we really wanted to encourage. The other thing that we did is then we publicized these winners. So we found that first week after we drew a name and we put it in the newsletter, we had calls about how can we get more parking passes for our employees. So it had the effect that we wanted. It had people getting interested in talking about it and enforcing that there are places to park and that we want our patrons and our residents to still come downtown.
The parking issue was a big one because probably everybody knows sometimes people park in the wrong places consistently where you'd rather your customers be. What this did was create this, so for the banks and things, which banks are very important and they need their customers, but they're still going to come and there's still ATMs and they're still online. It gave them ownership of this project. I have a parking lot behind my store for an office that has a lot of parking, and so I asked them would they consider moving, like would their staff go to one of the lots, and I mean it was entirely up to them whether they did it or not. One woman has taken this on as her own thing, and so she parks over there, but that she's now taken ownership in the whole thing, is that she watches and she knows that customers are parking back there, and it's helping two of my neighbors who have no parking so they can use that lot. It just brought people into the fold that maybe wouldn't have been as aware of what was going on and how important it was that shoppers could actually get downtown.
We also wanted to communicate to the property owners and business owners what's happening that week or the immediate future with the project. So the town are doing newsletters, and these newsletters are hand-delivered to all of the properties in the core. They're through our email blast system and can be found on our website. And in these newsletters, we have everything from what's happening that week in construction. We're again emphasizing parking and drop-off zones. We have key dates. What is important, again, this was a collaborative project in that we would always kick it to Julie and another member of the BIA to review, because they would say, ooh, change that one word, because that word might just make people a little nervous. And we didn't want to get too far ahead with dates, because if things come up and those dates aren't quite met. So we've done, I think, 7 issues in total. So actually every week we've produced a newsletter and circulated it, and we found this to be a very positive publication in the community. Julie, do you want to talk to access?
Oh yeah. Part of what we've done as a BIA, we've created a program and had done promotional things, but something that is kind of amazing is everybody kept saying that we needed a hashtag and we needed, quite frankly, I don't understand any of it. But anyways, we had a little powwow to come up with a hashtag for the construction. Not necessarily talking about construction, because sometimes that doesn't give a draw. So we came up one day with this hashtag of dig it St. Mary's, whether it is that you're digging it or that you in fact dig it, whatever the case was. And then we encouraged everybody on every piece that they sent out, whether it was construction related, which tons of social media that comes from downtown right now is construction related, because it's saying you can get in the front door, you can't get in the front door, use the back door. Anyway, so hashtag dig it St. Mary's has gone around. So yesterday, last night at about 7 o'clock, I checked what our numbers were. So to date, we have had 4,761,093 Dig it St. Mary's posts, which is very good, I think, if I were somebody who knew about social media at all. But so people are liking it, and it's one of those things that everybody can do it, it's easy, but the neat part of it, Stratford's going to have a construction project next year, and they've asked could they use Dig It, and so they would have Dig It Stratford. So generally, we watch their lead, now they're watching ours. We just keep flying through our pages now. Again, so back to merchants and accessibility and alleys. We're very fortunate that we have very good alleys. They've never really been used before. As far as pedestrian, there's been many conversations for years and years about how we could use them because they're great. Now we needed to use them. So we started, before the construction started, to encourage people to dress up their alleys, to make their back doors nice, to wherever you go into the back door to somebody's business, make it okay. And lots of people did it. In the tour that you'll do this afternoon, if you do the tour, you go down the one alley. We did a thing with the BIA, and we got, on a Monday night, we got 20 people came out to do a back alley tour. And all merchants, so that they knew who to go, where they would go, and what they would find, and so they could recommend to customers. So the back alleys are huge. Lots of people have parking, but the back doors are used more than the front doors now. And people that don't have a back door have made better friends with their neighbors. And so if you don't have a back door, then you can go through your neighbor's back door. We've had people create posters of the back doors of St. Mary's as opposed to the doors of St. Mary's and post them on social media. I don't know what's up there. And these are our MASH signs to how to get to the back doors. They are at the ends of our alleys so that it knows what businesses are down there. And people initially were funny about coming through, and they'd kind of open the door and they'd peek and say, "Is it okay?" And it's like, "Yeah, we want you." And now they feel like they have this private access to the whole business. And I've had people last weekend, because it was Mother's Day, it was very late when we were there, and I pitched a tent behind my store to put all the things that used to go on the sidewalk for Mother's Day. Anyways, I hadn't brought it all in. And people coming from the restaurant 2 doors down at 10 o'clock at night came in and said, "Can we still buy some of this?" It was pitch black. You couldn't see a thing. And they bought, like, a lot of stuff. So I think it's something that will continue after this because residents love it, but it's good for business. They're coming in both angles.
The other thing I just wanted to mention that we did as well is we have what's called roadsters. The town has employed roadsters to be feet on the ground, downtown, a visible face. They wear Ask Me aprons. They're blue. They are informed. They know what's going on, and they're there to help those people that look a little lost. How do I cross the street? Where do I need to go? I can't get into this business. They're there to take them, walk them to the back alley, show them the back entrances. So it's that visible presence on the main street. The lead roadster actually goes to our weekly construction meetings, so she hears everything firsthand herself. So it's all of these little pieces working together, the signage, the roadsters, the communication that have really made the project successful.
We're skipping some slides because of time.
We'll go 5 minutes and we'll take questions. Yeah.
As far as the BIA and the whole program, initially when this all started, people were horrified. They were basically counting the days until they were out of business, and this was just the beginning of the end. And then it got switched. As we moved forward in the process, and we were very involved in the whole thing, it turned from being this horrible thing to this opportunity to be, okay, how do we make this work? I think we are not alone. A lot of BIAs have challenges amongst themselves, as we did. What this has done is brought merchants together because, as I said before, people who don't have a back door, their neighbors are letting them use a back door. People who don't know how to build a door that's cut in half so they can sell sandwiches through the door, their next door neighbors did it for them. And they appreciate the fact that they know what's going on all the time. And that's because the town has kept us as part of the process, as opposed to telling us. They ask us, they listen to what we say. If we think something could be changed and it's changeable, they've done it. So as far as the pain of this, it hasn't been as painful as we had planned it to be. And a lot of people, we phoned other places and we talked to other stores who had gone through this and said what worked. And so we shared that information again to how to make a business work when it's under construction. And thus far, we're all good.
I think just final to note that what is important is that communication. We continue to have weekly construction meetings with the contractors, with the engineers, with Ontario Clean Water, BIA reps, and town staff. So every week, the same message is being heard by the same people, and so it's this consistent message coming from no matter who a resident or a property owner or a citizen speaks to, whether it's town staff, BIA, engineers, or the construction workers, the message is the same, and I think that has been the success. And we've made some partnerships here and have come up with some things that I think we want to continue to do far past the length of the project.
Okay, I want to thank our speakers today, but we're free to take questions now, sir.
John Associates, I'm a consulting engineer from Ottawa. Working with street renovations, I'm sure a lot of the buildings on Queen Street have stone foundation. Would that be right? Have you done anything to deal with the stone foundations? Because one of the problems that we experience with street reconstruction is now that you increase the road bed, you have a lot more gravel adjacent to the stone foundations. If you don't restore the foundations, you're going to flood the basements of your tenants all along Main Street.
Yes, so in this setting, we do have a lot of stone foundations, and they're not rubble stone, they're limestone, they're stacked and mortared, and they're actually quite reliable. There are a few brick foundations, but for the most part, they're a limestone that's been laid up as opposed to a rubble stone. They're quite durable. We've actually not changed the grade of the road much. The 1972 project included a full granular road to the MTO standards. That was part of their deal of taking away Highway 7. They would help with the rebuilding. So we have done very little with the granular base other than get down to the water services and back up.
At the rear.
Just a little message from the Heritage Board. If you have some wonderful buildings here, if you could have a plaque made up sometime in the future for each house and building with the historic information, that would be wonderful, because everybody likes to know your history. Now, when you talk about your street lamps, I'll give you a little tip. Don't do anything just yet with your street lamps. Maybe next year, change over to LED lights. Immediately, the first month of your bill, which is important for the mayor to know, your electrical bill will drop 60%. The installation costs, as far as installing the LED lights for the entire your town, will pay for itself within 3 years. And that's good, because I can remember when you were very proud to admit St.Marys only you stayed at 0% for your taxes each year. Like, I know it's not that now, you're improving, which is wonderful.
Thank you for your comments. That was a previous mayor. At the rear, please. Your comment or question at the rear, sir?
Yeah, I was just curious. I would agree for sure that the communication between all the big groups is extremely important to make it go smoothly. At one point, you did mention 2.2 million. I forget whether that was an overall budget number. Did that include the weekly site meetings? Has that been able to cover the newsletters, the having staff downtown to direct people, signage, all that?
No, that did not include. We had a separate budget for signage, for the roadsters, and for any of the communication dollars. So we did have an additional budget set aside for those additional expenses.
I will add that the contract document required that the contractor be prepared to meet weekly with the local committee, though. So that was built into the contract price, and that's part of it.
Sir?
I noticed as we went through this that it didn't appear, but I'll ask the direct question. Did you touch any of the parts of the Heritage District designation in the process of doing the reconstruction?
just to clarify, any of the buildings within the district?
Right.
Yes, all of the streets along, or all of the buildings along the main street fall within the district.
I realize that. What I'm saying is, did you have to touch any of that part of the designation in doing the reconstruction?
No, we did not.
Sir?
With your road reconstruction, you had mentioned new water services, so I'm assuming your existing water mains stayed in place and they were just abandoned. Right? Is that correct?
I know, maybe I could have been clearer at the start. So the reconstruction project in 1972, which was a major reconstruction of all of those elements, the water main, the sanitary sewer, the storm mains, those are all in quite good condition. They're what I describe as youthful, going into early middle age. We would expect 100 years, they're 44 years old. So we did not change those. Really the only buried infrastructure that was changed was the water services themselves.
So my question is, the new water services that you rooted into these older structures, did you run into any issues with lead services, any cross-contamination, which is a huge concern in our municipality? I'm just wondering if you ran into any of that, how you got with it.
Well, no, we didn't. As it turns out, again, that complete reconstruction in 72, let me talk a little bit about what I found. So I'm old enough that I was on the job in 1972. Working for the contractor at the time, actually. But that project included replacement of whatever there was. So there was an existing, don't cringe, there was an existing storm sewer that was doing all the chores, and that was, for the most part, done away with in 1972. There's still a piece on Water Street. But it was limestone slab base, stacked limestone sidewalls, and a limestone cap. And that was a combined sewer. In 1971-72, the town undertook to install sanitary sewers throughout the whole town. And of course, part of the project was a major reconstruction of downtown. So all of that cross-contamination was dealt with in 1972. The sanitary main and service connections were all brand new at that time. Each property received a new storm service as well as a sanitary service and a water service and a brand new storm main. So all of that, fortunately for us today, was looked after in 1972. And as I said at the start, the real driver was those failing copper water services. But anything that would have predated that was dealt with in 72. I suspect they likely found some lead services. They definitely would have found some iron services. And there probably were copper services existing too, although I don't just remember that. Further questions? Yes?
I don't have a question, I have a comment. And I don't know who else in this room went to the sessions yesterday. But in every session I went to, I heard at least one, if not more, kind of horror stories about people that were trying to achieve improvements, save heritage buildings, and ran into all kinds of boulders thrown in their way by the political system, by City Hall, by the municipal staff. And I just want to tell you, I really commend what you have done in terms of working together. It sounds like there's just been incredible cooperation, communication, and I think probably above all trust, that everybody was entitled to do the job we were doing and we were going forward with it. So I just wanted to say congratulations. This is the good news story of the whole conference for my book.
Mayor Al, as a lifelong resident of the town of St.Marys, being interested in everything that happens here, particularly as it touches on heritage, I want to comment that I found the presentation very interesting. A lot of it had to do with how the merchants were kept informed through the period of apprehension and concern about their businesses. And that has all turned out to be a very positive experience. Communication seems to have been a very important part of that, and pre-planning. I'm thinking of the citizens of this town who heard that this was going to happen, probably were just as apprehensive, but my observation is after 7 weeks of construction, there is a very positive feeling based on the fact that the people feel secure because of communication and how well the project is going. It's sort of like a giant renovate your house, you know, renovate the kitchen and the bathroom all in the same season. And it can be the worst nightmare your family ever went through, or it might be well planned and well done and a positive thing to look back on. Somebody could write, maybe not a book about how this has gone, but a nice thick pamphlet saying how well the people in the town, some 6,000 people, consultants always refer to the catchment area, people who also depend on this town for shopping, etc. They say half the people who use our facilities live outside the town. I think it's been a good experience so far. A lot of people are finding it fun. They can get in the back alley and come in the back door and see stuff that they always wondered about. It's nice to drive down Wellington Street and just take note. If parking is limited, there's a sign in the funeral home parking lot, parking available today. They are sharing that space because it's not needed on that particular day. It's just a wonderful story. Thank you so much.
Any other questions? I just want to take this time to thank our speakers for today, for taking the time on their side. I also want to thank you for visiting our town. There is a historic walk this afternoon if you're interested as well. Lunch, I understand, is at the United Church, which we're walking is up, straight up Church Street here. One of my favorite spots in the town, I'll tell you, and I mentioned this in my opening remarks in Stratford, is the Arthur Meehan statue. We're very proud to have a Prime Minister. The 9th Prime Minister of Canada is from St.Marys. And there's a statue that was a gift from the Government of Canada to the town of St.Marys after it sat in storage for many, many years. Prime Minister Diefenbaker was going to commission a statue on Parliament Hill. He found it ugly. He put it in storage. He said, he's quoted as saying it was a cross between Ichabod Crane and Daddy Longlegs. So it sat, the statue was going to be melted down, and at the time Elmer McKay, who was the Minister of Public Works, gave it to the town. We're very proud to have it. Actually, it's a very interesting statue. As you walk up the hill, it's on the left in Lynn Park if you want to have a look at it. I just wanted to point that out as well. We have many, many interesting historical traits in St. Marys, and I welcome you back to visit again. If you have any questions, please ask any of us around here. Thank you for visiting St. Marys. Thank you for taking the time to visit our town.
That's